Hello, everyone, and welcome to the future of space. I'm your host, Daniel Fox. Today, our guest is Scott Kelly. Scott is a former military fighter pilot and test pilot, an engineer, a retired astronaut, and a retired U.S. Navy captain. In October 2015, he set the record for the total accumulated number of days spent in space, the single longest space mission by an American astronaut. Captain Scott, welcome to the future of space.
Thank you, Daniel.
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Excellent. Excellent. Can't complain. Back on the road traveling and been missing traveling for 2 years. So I'm really happy. Scott, let's start with obviously the question that I ask all my guests. Could you share with us three words that capture the essence of space for you?
Three words. Really freaking cool.
Was that
I don't know if this is PG or R rated. If it's R rated, I'd say really fucking
ex-
cool.
excellent? Now, you spent a long time on the International Space Station, and I want to come back on that and the book that you wrote, Endurance, A Lifetime of Discoveries. But before we go there, could after all this time and your journey to space, can you share with us what for you is the human story of going to space?
Well, I think it's the story of humanity. I mean, we're explorers by design or by nature. If we weren't, we wouldn't exist anymore. I mean, we would have never ventured out of wherever we originated from. So I think it's just a part of who we are. It's something that is important. And I think it's like the ultimate thing for humanity to do is to venture out into space and discover new things. And, my hope is in my lifetime, I'll see people stepping foot on Mars.
If you had the opportunity to go to Mars today, would you take the trip?
Um, if I had the opportunity today, probably not because I got some things I need to do tonight. But in general, assuming that it was a mission that was properly vetted and managed, and you know uh, it was done professionally, I would absolutely go, as long as I had a return ticket. Because having spent a year living in an enclosed environment, which I guess would be somewhat similar to living in a habitat on Mars, I wouldn't want to spend the rest of my life there. I know there are people out there that are interested in doing that. I am not one of those. Certainly, I would watch that reality TV show because I think after a while it would be get very entertaining when people realize that they're never going to step outside in the sun again, never experience rain or wind. Yeah, it'd be interesting, and it's just not for me. There's too much about Earth that I like that I would never want to give up for forever. So, but yeah, I would definitely go as long as I had a reasonable chance of coming back.
You wrote in the title of your book is Endurance, which I want to ask you, were you debating between endurance and resilience, or for you it was just they're two different things? Because endurance seems that like it was kind of you endured a year, and resilient would be more, you develop the skills of going through that year. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I named it Endurance, A Year in Space, A Lifetime of Discovery for three different reasons. One is it was a year long mission, it was a mission of endurance at the time, the longest one on the space station. The other reason I named it that is I think if you consider my background as a poor student when I was younger, growing up, kind of a late bloomer, I guess they call it. Someone that experienced, some roadblocks and bumps along the way. Uh, not always the best at everything in the beginning, but getting pretty good at some stuff towards the end. So that made me think of the word endurance. And also, one of my heroes is Ernest Shackleton, and his ship was called Endurance, and it's got busted up and sunk in the ice in the early part of the 1900s, 20th century, and that was really a mission of endurance, having how those people survived. So, for those three reasons is why I chose that title.
I think you and I we could put ourselves into the category of good wines that get better with age. Even my life is a little bit more gets better and better with time. I would never go back in time, so I'm a
Hmm.
late bloomer. Um, the title says a lifetime of discoveries. I I assume there were expected discoveries, and then there were unexpected discoveries. Discoveries that you thought would change you, and the ones that really ended up changing you. Where were the biggest unexpected discovery for you?
Well, I think the biggest one that maybe my colleagues would agree with that have flown in space and had this opportunity is just the incredible appreciation you get for the planet, the Earth, the fragility of the atmosphere, the beauty of this place we call home, um, the appreciation that you get that we as a species that inhabit this planet are all in this thing called humanity together. When you look at Earth from space, you don't see any political borders during the daytime. You do at night, somewhat, depending on where you're looking. But just I think the experience just changes you in a very positive way, and that's probably of all the revelations or discoveries, I guess, that I've had along the way, that is probably the most powerful one.
The in my years of solo wilderness expeditions, there's an excitement of going out. There's coming back, you feel changed, but there are also moments during that time that you really wonder why you, why you find yourself there. Why did I decide to put myself in the middle of the store, just by myself? Were there moments? I assume that there were moments like that also, where you wondered what decision that led you to spend a year by yourself. Well, not by yourself, but a year up in the
Um,
ISS.
Once I did it, I never questioned it. I actually wasn't interested in flying in space for a year initially. When this idea came up, I had just been gotten back recently from a long duration flight that was 159 days, and which is a long time to be in space. And I wasn't really interested in spending more than twice as long. But like many things in our life, when we do something, and the further you get from it, you remember the good parts about it
Yeah.
and not the harder parts, maybe. Um, so as I got further from it, I knew I wanted to fly in space again, but I definitely wanted to fly again, and I wanted it to be different. So, I thought to myself, well, what would make it more interesting and more challenging than it being longer? Because that's the hard thing about living in space for a long time is that you're there for a long time, and all the discomfort and challenges that go along with being in that environment. So, eventually I warmed up to the idea, not 100%, because pretty soon preceding the announcement of who was going to be this year-long crew member for NASA, I was also interviewing to be the chief of the astronaut office. We needed a new chief, very prestigious job, head astronaut, right? Sounds cool. Look good on your LinkedIn profile, maybe. And The last question I was asked was, so if you could, fly in space for on the year-long mission or be the chief of the astronaut office, which would you choose? And I said, oh, absolutely. I would much rather be the chief of the astronaut office. And then like a week later, they gave some other guy that job, and I got assigned to the year long flight. So I don't know if that answers your question because I forgot what your question was, but hopefully
Well,
it does.
well, the question was just that if there were moments where you kind of were not kind of jokingly wondering, why you had accepted, because these moments when we're by ourselves, it's sometimes there are highs and then there are lows, and where the solid the lon- not the loneliness but the solitude kind of overtakes, and you wonder, the sanity of your decision of finding yourself remote like that.
Never once crossed my mind for a second, even in some really hard times, like when I was in space for my 159-day flight, and my sister-in-law, Gabby Giffords, was shot in the head, Tucson, Arizona, 6 people killed. Despite that being a really, really challenging and emotional time, I never once for a second, really felt like I shouldn't be there or felt sorry for myself. Certainly you would prefer to be home, but I never felt in any way that this was not the right decision for me to do this because, I am committed to the human space flight, the importance of it to NASA, to our country, the mission, all that. So never once, even on my year-long flight, did I ever think, this was not a good idea for me.
Now, were there I don't know, and I haven't not too sure that there was the information, but during that time that you were up at the ISS, were you always with someone else at the in the station, or there were periods of solitude where it was just you?
No, there's always people. You're always with somebody else. I mean, I think, in the U.S., we haven't had a solo space flight since the Mercury program. Russia, they stopped doing that fairly early on. So during the course of my, year-long mission, as we call it, it wasn't exactly a year, but it was close. I was always there with other people. The fewest was me and 2 Russians, Mikhail Kornienko and Gennady Podolko. We were together, just the three of us, for about 6 weeks. We had a little bit of a delay in getting a new crew up there because of the SpaceX uh, failure, and we wanted to conserve our cargo and consumables and stuff. So we delayed them launching. So, but most of the time you're there with 6 people. There's a period of time over the year for a week that there were 9 of us on board. Um, and you never feel like lonely or anything. I mean, people come and go. You're happy to see, new people arrive. When new people leave, even though you miss them, you're happy to see them leave because it's just showing that, time is passing. When a space shuttle would come up there, the one time I was there when a shuttle arrived, it was definitely a similar feeling to when your relatives show up at the holiday on the holidays. You're excited to see them, and then you're just as excited to see them leave.
I'm sure. I'm sure. So I know that when on expeditions, the food becomes just more of a of a ritual of survival. You just want. It's not about the culinary experience. Is really to get the nutrients. And I know that in at the space station, food is really the basic reality of giving your body the necessary nutrients. But after a year of in space, um, what was your food experience, and when you came down, how different was it? Did your body feel the lack of richness of the food experience, or were you able at one point to kind of stabilize the the experience?
Well, I think, from a nutritional perspective, the food is just fine. I mean, we have a group of, scientists, doctors, nutritionists that make sure that our food is good for us in space. There's certain things that you have to consider in space, bone loss, So particularly, and that can be, your diet can have an effect on that. Uh, so yeah, they take a lot of care in that. The menu, it gets a little bit routine, but it wasn't so routine that I was like, oh, I'm absolutely sick of this food and I'm ready to get out of here because the food stinks. 'Cause it doesn't stink. There's some of it that, if I had the barbecued beef and a tortilla, the irradiated barbecued beef, I'd probably eat it here. I would definitely eat the breakfast granola. The waffles aren't that bad. The eggs actually are not all that bad. They're very convenient and easy to make, rehydratable eggs. So there's, it wasn't really the food itself that gets fatiguing. The thing that kind of got more fatiguing about the whole experience was you just get tired of the the teediness of how challenging it is just to prepare the food, and then you're everything's got to be either velcroed down or taped to the table. Your spoon floats away sometimes. It was just much more comfortable to sit at a nice table with your friends and a nice dinner and some wine, and that whole experience is much different than kind of just floating there, eating your food out of a bag day after day after day. That becomes very, it's kind of a mundane kind of thing. But the food itself wasn't the best. I mean, if space food was really good, we would have restaurants that were called space food, and people would go there to eat space food. But space food ain't that great, so no restaurants. Um, yeah. But yeah, what I missed more, what I think, was just the experience of the people and the other, just the dining experience versus the actual stuff that you're
Yeah.
eating.
It's a little bit from my days of expeditions. I remember it's quite salty. So yeah, the restaurant always often have complaints that the food is too salty.
Yeah, which is a problem in space because that saltiness, I think, has some bone loss implications and also maybe stuff with our eyes they're concerned with.
Do you do you think that technology is going to solve all these issues as we move forward? That there's going to be a time where we figure it out exactly what to do, and also spending time in space in a gravity environment, so we don't there's not that floating around all the time. I mean, do you see a future where it's going to be fixed?
Well, I think that technology solves so far just about every problem that we've ever ran into through the course of history, from the wheel to the rocket, and everything in between. So yeah, technology is powerful. It's something that improves our lives, solves our problems. The microgravity environment, yeah, you could spin a spacecraft and create artificial gravity. Obviously it'd be more expensive, more complex. You could do it. The reality of it is we don't need it right now. I mean, to go to Mars, you don't need that living in a G field. You don't need to be living under gravity to go to Mars and be able to function. Someday, if we want to, send a crew to the moons of Jupiter or Saturn, somewhere that's going to be multi years in microgravity to get there, then I think we would probably need some kind of artificial gravity because we evolved uh, in gravity. So, our physiology is designed to operate within it. And when you take it away, it's kind of bad things happen to you. And over a long period of time, that might just be too much to handle to be able to function when you get to where you're going. Interestingly enough, I haven't watched the whole series, but that that show the expanse. One of the ways they torture people in the expanse is to take the people that have just basically lived their whole lives in space, floating around, and they just put them on Earth or in a gravity field, and it's torture for them. And I can relate a little bit to that because after coming back from a year, it's challenging.
Were you anxious when you came back? I mean, was there an excitement of not knowing if you would be able, first of all, to adapt rapidly or seeing some effects, or were you kind of ready to go home and move on to the next project?
Interestingly enough, like on my 6 month flight, 159 days, I was ready to come home. I mean, I felt like the walls were closing in. Hey, feel like this should be over. Let's get it over with. Get back home. The year long flight, and this shows you what your mind, how your mindset is important. Because the reason I was there was to be there for a long time. The duration I looked at more like a rite of passage, or every day I stayed there was like I got another, like, I don't know, merit badge as a Boy Scout or something. It was something that was important. The longer I stayed there, the more important it felt like what I was doing. So, had someone asked me on the year long mission if there was a good reason for it, like, hey, we can't get the new crew up there, something's wrong with the rocket, can you stay an extra month, an extra 6 months, an extra year? If there was a reason to do it, I absolutely could have stayed. Having said that, I was looking forward to coming home. I was curious about how I would feel, but it wasn't like I was apprehensive about it at all. It was just more of a scientific curiosity. I've flown in space 4 times. My first flight was 7 days, my second, 13, my third, 159, and my last, 340. And if you graph those, it's almost, as some smart person told me, it's a second order polynomial. And if I was to fly a fifth time, my fifth flight would have been over 5 years. So that's why I decided to retire, maybe. But it seems like my symptoms of how I felt when I got back kind of tracked it in a similar way. I definitely felt more than twice as bad after spending more than twice the amount of time in space. Absolutely. Uh, and so I'd be curious to see what people that wind up spending a significantly longer time as me, how they feel about it.
How long did I mean? Can you answer that? Because I'm conscious that there might be some science knowledge to hold there. But how long did it take for you to physically come back to a place that was your baseline?
You know, I I say 6 months. My wife will say eight. And I think the last 2 months is more just kind of getting back into the routine of life on Earth. Um, and it comes in. Certainly in the beginning, the first few days, you feel really bad. A couple of weeks later, you're feeling better. A month later, you're feeling better. 3 months. It comes in stages, but it does definitely takes a while. I mean, my heart lost 25% of its heart mass despite all the exercise. You lose blood volume, which you get back very quickly, especially when they give you an IV on the airplane coming home. But what you don't get back is the red blood cells. So you're tired. Your cardiovascular system is deconditioned. Your vestibular system takes a few weeks to get back to where you're balanced and you're not nauseous. Definitely some nausea involved initially. So yeah, it just comes in waves of recovery, but you get there eventually.
But I assume that the heart is, I mean, being a muscle is back to what it's supposed to be, or that's a loss of muscle that you never get back.
No, I think you get all the muscle back, assuming you exercise. As far as the bone is concerned, I don't. I think the jury's out a little bit on it. I've heard some people, some research saying that yeah, you might get all your 100% of your bone might recover, but is it the same kind of bone? Is it the same structure? Is it as strong? We've had a couple astronauts break their hips after long duration flights. It definitely takes a toll on your uh, on your skeletal system. And I noticed yesterday, I think this Raj Shari, who just got back after being in space like 6 months, he was tweeting pictures of his spine that were his spine was a little crooked after probably due to the bone loss after his flight. So it's a serious issue that we need to and we're working on it. I mean, NASA takes it very seriously, clearly. So and we'll figure it out.
I wrote how the human cost of exploration has dramatically been reduced recently. I mean, in the last few decades. If you compare the amount of lives that were lost to just in the Great Migration from Europe because they were kind of blindly going to places. I mean, even in the, you're talking about Shackleton and his crew. They were going to the Arctic or Antarctica and really kind of going with a little bit of knowledge and experimenting as they went along. Um, and in the book Homo Deus, he talks about how the three big killers of our society, famines, wars, and diseases, have been kind of controlled. Now we have robots on Mars. And so even exploration, we can send robots or we can send like individuals to gather information. But when we will be making these moves, it's not going to be as dangerous or it's not going to cost as many lives as it did before. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think it's so complicated and takes so much energy to put people into space that um, to compare, going to Mars to crossing the Atlantic in the 1400s is apples and oranges. Would it be as risky? I don't know, maybe, but I think they're kind of hard to compare because you don't have the same number of people. Certainly, you don't have probably not disease and famine. Hopefully, you'll be able to quarantine the people appropriately so you're not sending any diseases to Mars. Your food hopefully will be pre-positioned, and if you had any issues of famine or were at risk, that would be mitigated by coming back. So I don't know. I just think it's hard to compare the two because they're it's just a different time, a different era, different things.
And I mean, the behind the scenes of the complication, how complicated it is, just the engineering aspect, the science aspect, the science reality, the impact. How, when you think about it in your head, how many years into the future are we looking at before we have a sustainable amount of people, like the traffic of people that travel and go, or that we have um, private hotels in orbits? When you think of a number in your head, how many years are we thinking about?
No idea. Um, I think we have the technology to to launch a reasonably possibility of success Mars mission right now. But what we really need more than the technology, I think, is just the political will, the public support, and that all culminates in the money to do it. My brother Mark says that going to Mars is not about rocket science; it's about political science because that's what it's going to take to get there more than the rocket science. Fortunately, he's now a politician, so hopefully he can help with that.
What about the moon? What do you think the moon? How much is going to change our relationship with space now when we go back to the
Man,
moon?
imagine having those 1970s 60, 69, 70 moons missions today with the technology we have today with um, 8K camera and 3D. You could basically probably put on a headset and feel like you're on the surface of the moon with the astronauts that are someday going to explore it. So I think it's just going to be absolutely incredible, and hopefully the public won't tire of it after the first human flight back to the moon.
Now, so what gets you up in the morning? I mean, you've done a lot. I mean, your book, a lifetime of discoveries. You've experienced a lot. You're accomplished pilot. You've been speaking. But what is that little spark in the morning that keeps the engine going?
Um, I don't know. I feel like I got stuff to do. A lot of different things I do. Right now I'm spending a lot of time, advocating for the people in Ukraine, raising money. I raised over $500,000 or $500,000 recently for Ukrainian humanitarian relief. I regularly tweet at Russians in Russia in Russian. Um, but I do other things. I'm on some company boards. I involved in some, Hollywood projects, um, some branding stuff, public speaking, all that. I mean, I got a pretty busy schedule actually. So that's good. Got to keep moving, got to keep pushing ahead
You,
always. As soon as we stop,
well,
bad things happen.
that's what life is, really.
Yeah.
Scott.
Yep. That is life.
Life is constantly wanting to move forward. It doesn't want the status quo of, let's sit back and do nothing. It constantly creates disruption and wants
Mhm.
tension so that it can move forward. You said you mentioned you kind of opened the door for Ukraine, and I was reading in your Wikipedia that on you tweeted during the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine that you would return your medal for merit in space exploration by mail to Russian embassy in Washington, telling the former Russian president Dmitry
Medvedev.
Medved to give it to the Russian mother whose son. Okay, to the Russian mother whose son has died to this unjust war. Did you actually mail your
Yeah, I
medal?
mailed it the same day I tweeted that at him.
And can you share what was the outcome? I mean, did you get a feedback or an acknowledgement of the of a reception?
No, I didn't get any response or feedback or anything. And I didn't expect to. I mean, um, yeah, I would have no expectation that they would ever respond to something like that. But for me, it was the fact that with yeah, I got a lot of Russian friends that I care deeply about. I have Ukrainian friends, I have Ukrainian family members, Ukrainian Americans who are suffering the worst in this. Some of the Russian people will suffer as well economically, nothing nearly as bad as the Ukrainians are. And some of those people are good people. Some of them are my friends. So it's a really serious issue for me, very personal. And I've spent so much time there too, and I really grew to love a lot about Russia and certain things. And then this happens, and it's absolutely disgusted me and made me feel like I had wanted nothing to do with the Russian government in its current form. And the fact that the guy who presented that medal to me is, still in the Russian government, and he's a very powerful person. and he regularly threatens people with nuclear war. So, he can take that medal and do whatever he does with it, but I didn't want it, if you get my drift.
Absolutely. Do you were you surprised by the world? I mean, staying within the Ukraine and Russia war going on, were you surprised by how the world, even the corporations, stepped up and came together and acted in ways that I think Putin didn't even anticipate?
I wasn't surprised. I expected that that was what was going to happen. I mean, when you wage a war like that in Europe, and I know, people will say, well, what about Africa? What about these other places? You know, eh, I think the more, for right or wrong, the more advanced, the more democratic, the more modern the society becomes, the more, I guess, the less you expect something like this, where one country would invade another. Um, Putin's, I think, motivation for this was he just could not have a prospering democratic nation that was performing better than his kleptocracy, across the border, because it threatens his hold on power. And, when he's not in power any long, you know, kind of the jury's out on what's going to happen to him, right? So I think that was his
Yeah.
motivation. And, but it didn't surprise me at all how, most countries, free societies, kind of stepped up to the plate, because if you let him get away with this, if you let him get away with his nuclear saber rattling that he does, or his government does, then you will be held hostage to him forever. So, I'm very happy with how we've approached this, and think the administration is doing a great job. I think NATO and other countries, for the most part, are really doing their part to help. Then Russia will not win this, and the longer this goes on, the more Ukrainians will certainly suffer, but Russians will suffer too, when their children are coming back in body bags, and maybe not even coming back. It seems like that's a policy for Russia, not to return their dead during times of war, just to kind of cover it up. So, their economy is going to suffer greatly, generationally, probably. So, I don't expect Putin to listen to me or anyone else. But it's really fortunate that he just does not realize that he will lose. And the longer he waits, the more he will lose.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Now, besides when you mentioned that you raised money, um, what else have your organizations have done in support of Ukraine? And if people wanted to give money or support the effort that you're doing, what can they do to help you?
My Twitter site has a fundraiser on there that has some t shirts that we're selling. But
Okay.
also, in that same pinned tweet, there's a way to just donate money directly. You got to look for it a little bit. And so far, the money we've sent, uh, well over $400,000, has gone to this organization called the Global Empowerment Mission, and they take almost all the donations and just buy food and diapers and medical supplies, humanitarian relief, and put it on trucks and send it right into Ukraine. So the money, it's not going to a charity that has very high overhead. It's actually going to physical goods, so that help people in need there. So yeah, you could donate through that if you prefer, or you could just donate directly to the Global Empowerment Mission. I'm sure they would love to, accept your donations.
We'll make sure anyway that the links and the informations are in the description so that people can follow up, and also to your Twitter account so they can follow you, but find out more information about
Mhm.
the t-shirts and the effort that you're doing. Are you hopeful that with all the discord and some of the divisions that are going on between going to space and leaving Earth in the in the dust, are you hopeful though that the future is a promising future where we have the capacity. I mean, yes, we have the capacity, but we will actually become a better society as we go to space.
Hope so. People, you hear people saying sometimes that, oh, we need to save Earth. Earth's going to be just fine. It might get rid of us, if we don't treat it well, and might exterminate us. But Earth will just be fine without us. In a million years, there'll be no evidence that we ever existed if the planet decides that that's what it wants. Do I think going to space is going to help the planet? I don't see us all moving to Mars, if that's what you mean. Um,
No.
we're always going to have to live on this planet, at least most of us. I think exploration is important for a number of reasons, but not because we're going to just, trash this planet and we need to move on to the next one. I don't look at it that way. But yeah, I don't remember what your question was now.
No, but in terms of the Earth, I totally agree, and that's been one of the arguments that I often have with people who said we have to save the Earth. We need to change to save the Earth. I'm like, no, you don't need to change to save the Earth. You want to change because you choose to have a different relationship with the Earth. But the Earth, even if you trash it and you effed up everything, um, it's going to be at our loss. The planet is going to reset the clock, and then it's going to be something else in the future. And whether it's good, whether it's bad, well, it depends where you are in that equation. If you were the dinosaurs, you were there for 200 million years, and then there you're not. But their disappearance was our gain. So maybe that our loss. If we do f it up, we'll be at the gain of something
See it.
else. But changing the perspective from a place of righteousness to a place of humility, because the vast majority of people wake up in the morning trying to do the right thing, and if they have the decision to make between saving their family or saving the earth, obviously they're going to try to save their family on the short term.
Yeah,
So
I
trying to
understand.
save something that is so much bigger than you is hard for a lot of people to relate to. So, but we I'm kind of optimistic in the future, as I think that's one of the successes of the human species, that we've been able to kind of figure a way forward as we keep meeting these milestones that are they're challenging, but then we find out how to pass them. I think that's one of the successes of our stories. So, Scott, you are on Twitter. We're going to put the link. If people don't want to find out more about how to support your work with Ukraine, they can find it there. You're also on Instagram. We'll put all the links. If you had just a few words of wisdom to share with the rest of the world as we depart, what would those words be?
Words of wisdom? Man, you're putting me on the spot.
Yes, by the great Captain Scott Kelly's great words of
Great
wisdom.
words of wisdom. Never give up on your dreams. I mean, if you consider where I came from and what I've had the privilege of gotten to do, if you knew me as a kid, you would be like, man, that kid's never going to do anything like that. But I never gave up. So, what I try to encourage people is to do the same. Never, ever give up on yourself. Work hard, challenge yourself, and win or lose, you'll be better for it.
Excellent. Well, I'm so glad that you got to follow your dreams, because A, we will not be here having a conversation. Our common friend Scott would have not introduced us, and the world would be a little sadder without your hindsight and your wisdom. So thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Daniel. Have a good day.
All right, Scott.
Take it easy.